Hey everyone, quick thing before we dive in. I was looking at my analytics and it turns out most of the people watching aren't actually subscribed. See this? Way more views than subscribers. If you're enjoying the videos and want to see more, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and you'll never miss new uploads. Alright, let's get into it.
The cold, unforgiving slab of the cell bunk was my first conscious sensation. Not the searing pain of a bullet wound, not the crushing grip of an arresting officer, but an overwhelming, bone-deep chill that permeated my very being. I blinked, the fluorescent hum of a single flickering bulb above my head slowly resolving into focus. Barred windows, gray walls, a stainless steel toilet. This was it. Abbott State Penitentiary. Home. For the next how many years? I couldn't quite recall the exact sentence. The liquor store robbery had been a blur, a desperate, fumbling act born of an empty stomach and a colder wallet. A petty crime, really. Not violent. Nobody hurt. Just a register emptied, a single bottle of cheap whiskey snatched on the way out. I had almost laughed at the irony. Sober when I planned it, drunk when I fled, now imprisoned to face the consequences. "Heard the new fish is a real piece of work," a gruff voice echoed from the next cell block, cutting through the low murmur of the prison. "Killed his old lady and kids, they say." I flinched, a jolt of pure, unadulterated fear shooting through me. No, not me. That was Torque's rap, the infamous monster whose name had been whispered in hushed tones during my processing. I wasn't him. I wasn't a monster. I was just Alex. A thief. A small-time fuck-up. This wasn't the kind of place for me. This was death row, where they sent the worst of the worst. My crime, a momentary lapse of judgment, felt microscopic in comparison. Suddenly, a low rumble, faint at first, then growing into a thunderous roar, shook the entire penitentiary. The flickering bulb above my head shattered, plunging my cell into near total darkness, only illuminated by the faint, emergency reds of the corridor beyond. A high-pitched, metallic shriek ripped through the air, followed by the terrifying, tortured groans of twisting metal. The concrete floor beneath me bucked and heaved. An earthquake! Screams erupted. "What the hell is going on? Let us out! We still humans, man!" But the pleas were quickly drowned out by a cacophony of shattering glass, falling debris, and something far more disturbing. A wet, tearing sound, followed by a guttural roar. I pressed myself against the back wall, heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't a natural disaster. This was a nightmare made real. A shadow, vast and impossibly quick, darted past my cell door, something heavy with an audible clink of steel. Then a grotesque, blade-limbed arm, sharp as a razor, tore through the steel bars of my cell, twisting the metal like soft clay. The creature seemed to barely acknowledge me, instead slashing at the cell across from mine, reducing the unfortunate inmate within to a bloody spray against the far wall. The cell door, now bent and mangled, hung ajar. Freedom. I stumbled out, eyes darting, desperately searching for a weapon. The air was thick with dust, the acrid scent of ozone, and a sickening coppery smell. I found a dead guard impaled against the wall, a rusty shiv clutched in his stiffening hand. I pulled it free, the blade slick and warm. I wasn't a fighter, never had been. I was a survivor, a scrambler. This shiv felt alien, a perverse extension of my desperate act at the liquor store. You gotta help me, man," a voice rasped from a nearby, half-collapsed cell. A young inmate, no older than me, was trapped under a fallen beam, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle. He looked up, eyes wide with terror, then down at my bloodied shiv. "Please, I ain't done nothing wrong." I hesitated. "Help him, Alex. You know what it's like to be desperate." But then another voice snaked into my mind. "He's dead weight. Leave him. Take your freedom now." I looked at the suffering man, then at the gaping maw of the ruined corridor. I was no hero. But I wasn't a killer. Not truly. I remember the cashier's terrified face, the way my own hands had trembled. I hadn't hurt anyone. I wouldn't start now. With a grunt, I started trying to shift the beam. A sharp, metallic clink, clink, clink echoed from further down the hall. Another one of those blade-armed things. Closer. "Damn it! I can't move this!" I hissed, straining. The inmate whimpered. The creature's shadow loomed, growing larger, its blades glinting in the emergency light. "Go! Leave me!" the inmate screamed, tears streaming down his face. "Just go!" I paused, the metallic stench of the monster filling my nostrils. "Don't leave him!" But another voice inside me sneered. "He knows his place. Yours is out there. Take it." I looked at the mangled inmate, at the approaching horror. I was no killer, but I wasn't a martyr either. I dropped the shiv beside him. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and ran. The inmate's screams and the creature's steel limbs tearing through flesh echoed behind me. It was my first choice, my first failure. A small seed of new guilt planted in the fertile, dark soil of this place. The sounds of the prison were a symphony of madness. The incessant clink, clink, clink of the blade-armed creatures, the distant howls of something unseen, and the ever-present groaning rumble of the decaying facility itself. Now weaponless, I moved with a frantic desperation, fueled by adrenaline and the sheer terror of my situation. I hugged the walls, ducking into empty cells, trying to avoid the grotesque figures that now freely roamed the once ordered corridors of Abbott. This wasn't just a prison. It was a charnel house. The air grew heavy, damp, with a metallic tang. I found a stairwell, its concrete steps cracked and crumbling, leading deeper into the prison's bowels. Maybe the lower levels held a way out, an exit. A flicker of hope sparked within me. There has to be a way out. Just keep going. As I descended, the light grew dimmer, the sounds more muffled. I entered a section that smelled of disinfectant and something else, something cloyingly sweet and sickly. Medical. I saw a row of impaled guards, each with dozens of syringes protruding from their bodies, their eyes wide and glassy. They looked like macabre pincushions. Then I saw their attackers. Twitching, syringe-covered monstrosities, their limbs gangly and adorned with needles, some even piercing their own eye sockets. They moved with an unsettling jerkiness, occasionally flinging long, thin needles that stuck into the concrete walls with a soft thwip. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. These weren't like the blade creatures, all brute force. These were insidious. I remembered the adrenaline shot the paramedics had given me after the robbery. The sharp prick, the sudden rush. I saw a discarded revolver on the floor next to a dead officer, and I snatched it up, its cold weight surprisingly comforting. I wouldn't be caught without a weapon again. One of the syringe creatures turned its head, its needle eyes fixing on me. It let out a low, hissing sound and started to advance, its body shuddering as it shed a few needles onto the floor. I squeezed the trigger. The shot was deafening in the confined space, echoing off the cracked tiles. The creature stumbled, its movements becoming even more erratic, before collapsing in a puddle of greenish acid. I gagged, the smell burning my nostrils. I had never killed anything before, not even a rat. Now this. I moved cautiously, the revolver held tight, picking my way through discarded medical equipment and the twitching remains of the syringe monsters. I was making good choices, I told myself. Surviving, protecting myself. This was different from the robbery. This was self-defense. This was necessary. Then a low scraping sound from above, followed by a sickening thump. Something dropped from the ceiling, a grotesque figure that ripped itself from the shadows, its neck elongated and raw. It landed with a soft, leathery thud, then swiveled to face me. I remembered a flickering image from my youth, a newspaper clipping about a local convenience store owner who had strung himself up after a series of robberies. I fired, again and again, the revolver bucking in my hand. The hanging creature shrieked, its body convulsing before it fell, its limbs thrashing. See? You're getting good at this, Alex. Necessity. I continued deeper, the prison becoming a labyrinth of broken walls and shadowed corners. I entered a laundry room, the scent of stale bleach and unwashed linens heavy in the air. The floor was slick with water from burst pipes, and the silence was unnerving. Too quiet. I moved toward a large, overturned industrial washing machine, hoping to find more ammo. Suddenly, a series of long, syringe-like barbs slammed into the wall inches from my head. I spun around, heart leaping into my throat. 3 syringe monsters emerged from the shadows, their forms swaying. But they weren't alone. From the ceiling above, 2 of those hanging creatures dropped, their stretched necks swaying like ghastly pendulums. I was caught. I was trapped. Against the far wall, between the needle-flinging horrors and the ceiling-crawling nightmares. "Oh, God, no," I gasped, my mind racing. I only had 4 bullets left in the revolver. I fired 2, dropping 1 syringe creature, then another. But the remaining monsters advanced, their needles glinting. One hanging creature swooped down, its leathery hand reaching for my throat. This is it. This is how I die. For a damn liquor store. My thoughts flashed to the store, the bright lights, the cheerful jingle of the bell when I'd walked in, the terror when I'd brandished the empty bottle, a pathetic, improvised weapon. Now I was facing monsters, and the fear was absolute. I dodged the creature's grab, rolling on the slick floor, barely avoiding another volley of needles. I was out of options. My heart pounded in my ears. Fear, rage, and desperation collided inside me like a perfect storm. Then pain. Unimaginable, searing pain shot through every nerve ending in my body. I opened my mouth to scream, but what came out was a guttural, unhuman roar. "What's happening to me?" I tried to shout, but my words tangled into an animalistic growl. My vision blurred and shifted, the world bathed in a crimson filter. My skin felt like it was splitting open. I watched in horror as my hands, my human hands, began to twist and elongate. Bones cracked and reformed, muscles tore and regrew. My fingers stretched into massive, razor-sharp claws dripping with a dark, inky substance. "This isn't possible," my mind screamed, even as my body continued its nightmarish transformation. Was I hallucinating? Had I been infected by something? Was I dying? The revolver clattered to the floor from hands that were no longer hands. My entire body convulsed, growing larger, stronger, more savage with each spasm. The prison jumpsuit tore at the seams as my form expanded. What was happening? How was this possible? I was becoming something else. The 2 remaining syringe creatures shrieked, flinging needles that should have pierced my flesh but instead bounced harmlessly off my now hardened skin. I felt the impact like pebbles against armor. The hanging creatures recoiled, their long necks snapping back in what looked like fear. A primitive, savage consciousness began to override my thoughts. Part of me was horrified, trapped inside this monstrous form, screaming to understand what was happening. But another part, a darker, more primal part, embraced it with terrifying eagerness. I lunged forward with speed I shouldn't possess. I tore through one needle monster with a single swipe of my monstrous claw, its syringe-covered body exploding in a spray of acid and dark ichor. The sensation was exhilarating. The other tried to flee, but I was faster, stronger. I slammed it against the wall, reducing it to a mangled mess. What am I doing? What am I? My human consciousness flickered like a dying bulb as the beast took control. The 2 hanging creatures descended, but my new reflexes were lightning fast. I grabbed one by its impossibly long neck and ripped it in half, then turned to the other, its terrified shriek cut short as I crushed its skull with a sickening crunch. The savage joy I felt was alien and horrifying. As quickly as it had come, the transformation began to reverse. The red haze receded from my vision. Agonizing pain racked my body again as bones, muscles, and skin contracted and reformed. I collapsed against the wall, gasping, my prison clothes hanging in tatters around my now human form. I was covered in the dark blood of the creatures, trembling uncontrollably. What just happened to me? I whispered, staring at my hands, normal hands again, in disbelief and terror. Am I infected? Am I dying? Am I becoming one of them? No answer came except the dripping of monster blood from the walls. I had survived. But at what cost? I looked at the carnage I had wrought, trying to reconcile what I'd just experienced. Had the island done this? Was it distress? Some kind of poison or contamination from these creatures? I needed to understand what was happening to me. I needed to know if I could control it, or if it would eventually control me. The desperation that had driven me to rob the store now seemed trivial compared to this new horror, the raw, uncontrollable power lurking beneath my skin, waiting to be unleashed again. The taste of fear was a constant companion, dry and metallic on my tongue. My transformation had saved me, but the memory was a fresh, festering wound on my psyche. I was no longer just Alex, the petty thief. I was Alex, the reluctant monster. I found myself in the prison's decaying mess hall, overturned tables and chairs scattered like giant broken toys. I found another revolver and felt a bit better with it. A low, static-filled voice crackled from a broken PA system. "Welcome, my fine gentlemen. I'm so glad you've come to see the show. My performance on you, as it were, will be something I shall thoroughly enjoy. I trust so shall you." The voice, theatrical and chilling, filled the air. I didn't understand what it meant, but I kept moving, desperate to find an exit. After navigating more twisted corridors, I stumbled into what must have been the prison's supply warehouse. Rotting wooden crates stacked to the ceiling, rusted metal shelving units, abandoned forklifts frozen mid-task. The stale air reeked of mildew and something else, the phantom smell of expired food. This place was meant to store resources, but now it stood empty and decaying. A moan broke the silence. Low, unsettling, hungry. From between two stacks of broken pallets emerged a creature unlike I'd seen yet. Gaunt beyond starvation, skin like cracked leather stretched over bone, with hollow eyes that reflected only the dimmest emergency lights. It shuffled towards me with a weird, jerky gait. Not attacking exactly, but reaching out with skeletal fingers. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. My hand tightened around the revolver. It lunged forward. Its touch was like plunging into ice water. I felt my strength draining away, my vision blurring, my thoughts slowing to a crawl. This wasn't physical pain. This was something attacking my mind, my will. I fired the revolver, the shots tearing through its desiccated form, but the thing barely flinched. Another shot, another. Useless. I stumbled backward, desperately searching for anything that might help. I found an old fire axe leaning against a crate. I swung wildly, the heavy blade connecting with a sickening thwack. The creature shrieked, a sound of pure, starved agony, and recoiled, dissolving into dust. "They just want to take what you have," a raspy voice whispered from behind a stack of burlap sacks. I whirled, revolver raised. An older man emerged slowly, his prison jumpsuit torn and filthy, his eyes wide and unfocused. "You've got to satisfy them or they just keep taking." He trembling finger pointed to an untouched food crate nearby. "Give them something or they'll take everything." "Who are you?" I demanded, keeping the revolver trained on him. "Elias, prisoner. Been here long time. Seen things. Learned things." Elias became my reluctant guide through the warehouse. He seemed to know which corridors to avoid, which shadows harbored threats. I didn't trust him completely, but having another human presence was comforting in this nightmare. Following Elias, we entered what had once been the commissary. The shelves now held massive, lumbering creatures, their bodies seemingly made of compressed garbage. Empty food cartons, tattered clothes, broken tools. Chains hung from their limbs, heavy with coins and keys that clinked as they moved. I emptied my revolver into one. The bullets just disappeared into its mass. "They want payment," Elias whispered. "Give them something of value, or they'll take you." I reluctantly sacrificed precious items, a bottle of water I had picked up earlier, some of my dwindling ammo, to pacify these things. Each exchange felt weird, but necessary for survival. We were navigating a particularly tight passage between stacks of rusted oil drums when Elias froze. His usual dazed expression crystallized into pure terror. "They're here!" he rasped, voice barely audible. From both ends of the narrow corridor emerged two massive figures, towering things made of what looked like ancient stone. They moved with deliberate power, each step shaking the floor. In their hands they held crude, heavy scales, their eyes just pinpricks of cold blue light fixed on me. One moved forward, each step shaking the ground. I fired at it, a panicked, stupid gesture. The bullet just pinged off its stone body. It didn't even flinch. Instead, it raised its massive scales, and suddenly the air around me thickened. My movement slowed to a crawl. I felt physically crushed by some invisible force. "Run, Alex, run!" Elias's voice cracked with panic. He scrambled over a pile of crates with surprising agility for his age, disappearing into a crawl space. I was trapped. These things advanced, the pressure increasing with each step. I could barely lift my legs. The walls closed in, the air grew colder. Something snapped inside me once more. A roar tore from my throat, primal and raw. The world blurred crimson. Raw power surged through my veins. I felt my muscles swelling, felt something sharp sprouting from my fingertips. I could tear these stone bastards apart. But then, unbidden, the cashier's terrified face flashed in my mind. The dying inmate I'd abandoned. Was this what I really was? A monster? I fought against the transformation, gritting my teeth as whatever was trying to emerge battled my will. With everything I had left, I dropped to my knees, not surrendering, but thinking. I wasn't stronger than this place, but maybe I could be smarter. I wasn't a killer by nature. I was a thief. I knew how to create diversions. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small silver locket, worthless to anyone but me, a forgotten keepsake from a life that seemed centuries ago now. I hurled it with all my strength, not at the stone giants, but at a stack of precariously balanced crates behind them. The crates crashed down with a thunderous noise, showering the things in debris. The crushing pressure eased as their attention wavered. I scrambled through the gap Elias had used, lungs burning, muscles screaming. Behind me I heard rumbling sounds, confused and angry. I survived, not by becoming a monster, but by remembering who I was, a desperate thief with nothing but his wits. But that near transformation had taken something from me. I felt it in the way my hands still trembled, in a migraine building behind my eyes. Alone now, Elias lost somewhere in the warehouse maze, I found a service elevator. It descended with a shuddering groan, taking me deeper into whatever hellscape this prison had become. The air grew heavier, thicker. The doors opened to what was definitely not a prison anymore. A decaying urban landscape sprawled before me. Dilapidated brick buildings, broken windows, fire escapes hanging by threads, garbage-filled alleys forming a nightmare city. Not Baltimore or any real place, but a twisted dream version of urban decay. I saw movement in the shadows. Shuffling figures emerged from the alleyways, tattered things whose forms seemed made of old clothes, faces hidden in darkness. They didn't attack like the others. They just shuffled towards me, reaching out, whispering pleas too quiet to make out. When one grabbed me, a wave of crushing despair washed over me, my mind filled with images of my own failures, the hunger, the cold, the desperation that had led me to that liquor store. I felt my grip on reality slipping. I could break free by lashing out, a burst of violence that sent them reeling, but I knew if I did, I would feel worse somehow. Or I could give them something, a bullet from my dwindling supply, a scrap of food I might need later. When I gave them something, they'd dissolve into shimmering dust, leaving me momentarily at peace. I pushed deeper into this nightmare city, every alley seeming to twist back on itself, trapping me in an endless maze. I stumbled into what must have been a market square. Overturned stalls, empty display cases, rusted scales littering the cobblestones. The tattered beggars were everywhere here, their whispers merging into a chorus of need. I was running low on everything: ammo, food, patience. From the center of the square, where a statue might have once stood, a massive figure took shape. Colossal, grotesque, its body looked like a mountain of ancient weathered books. Its eyes burned like green fire. In its enormous hands, it held a set of scales larger than any I had seen. Its gaze fell on me, and I collapsed to my knees. Every bad choice, every theft, every abandoned person, every act of violence, all of it slammed into me with physical force. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. Red and black visions swirled at the edges of my sight. The tattered beggars swarmed around me, drawn to my despair, their hands reaching to take what little sanity I had left. I couldn't move, couldn't fight. The beggars clawed at me, my failures echoing in my mind. This wasn't death by violence. This was something worse. Soul-crushing, overwhelming dread. As consciousness began to slip away, I made one last, desperate move. I had one item left, a moldy piece of bread I'd been saving for when true starvation hit. With the last of my strength, I threw the bread not at the judging colossus, but into the thickest swarm of beggars. They turned as one, a collective moan escaping them. They fell upon the bread, fighting over the meager offering, momentarily forgetting me. The giant thing, distracted by this shift in attention, turned its burning gaze toward the feeding frenzy. Its massive scales swayed, its focus shifting away from me. I seized my chance. Still weak, I forced myself toward a gap between market stalls. I heard the giant's frustrated rumble as I staggered away. I was bruised, mentally shattered, bleeding, but alive. Battered beyond anything I'd ever experienced, I finally reached what looked like the edge of this nightmare city, a crumbling wall leading to a rotting wooden dock. Across dark, choppy waters, I saw a faint light. A boat? Hope surged through me. I'd made it this far, through horrors I couldn't have imagined. I had survived. This had to be the way out. "Impressive journey, Alex," a voice said from behind me. I turned to find a man in a twisted parody of a businessman's suit, his face stretched in an unnatural grin. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded. "You may call me Killjoy," he said with a theatrical bow. "I've been watching your progress with great interest." "What is this place?" I asked. "What's happening to me? Why am I turning into whatever that thing was?" Killjoy circled me slowly. "Carnate Island has always been a special place, Alex. It responds to its inhabitants, shapes itself to their minds, their fears, their guilt." "My guilt? For what? I robbed a liquor store because I was starving." "Did you ever wonder why you came here, to a maximum security prison for violent offenders, for such a petty crime?" Killjoy asked, his smile widening. I don't understand. You were never meant to be here, but the island wanted you. It saw something in you, potential." The light across the water grew stronger. I could make out the outline of a Coast Guard vessel approaching the dock. Rescue! Freedom. "The Coast Guard?" I whispered, hope raw in my throat. Killjoy's smile widened. "Look closer, Alex." The Coast Guard vessel shimmered like a mirage as it neared. Its engines sputtered and died. The boat dissolved, revealing something else entirely. Where the rescue boat had been, a dilapidated barge now floated. Its hull was rotting wood and rusted metal, creaking mournfully as it bumped against the dock. No captain, no crew, just a single flickering lantern swinging from its mast. On its deck stood silent figures, gaunt, spectral, with eyes that held eternal weariness. They clutched meager possessions, a coin, a piece of bread, a trinket. "Who were they?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. "People like you," Killjoy explained simply. "Not violent criminals, just people caught in the island's trap." "So this is hell? Eternal punishment for a minor crime?" Killjoy shook his head. "Not hell, just carnate. The island transforms people. You've felt it, haven't you? The beast inside. That's what carnate does. It finds the monster hiding in everyone and brings it out." "I'm not a monster," I protested weakly. "Every choice you've made since arriving has suggested otherwise. When that inmate was trapped, you ran. When those creatures attacked, you transformed. When the beggars reached you, you sometimes struck them down. Always choosing survival over sacrifice." I felt a pull toward the barge, invisible but irresistible. "That thing I turned into, that's not me." "It is now," Killjoy said simply. "The island has claimed you. The transformation will become easier each time. Soon, you won't be able to change back." "So I'm damned forever?" Killjoy's expression turned enigmatic. I stepped onto the barge, not fighting the pull anymore. The spectral figures turned toward me, their hollow eyes showing recognition. A collective sigh swept through them. I was one of them now. The barge drifted away from the dock, out into dark waters. It circled the island, the shore always visible, but forever out of reach. In the distance, I could see the prison, the warehouse, the nightmare city, all the places I'd fought so hard to escape. I understood now. This wasn't about the liquor store robbery. It was about every choice I'd made since, choosing myself over others, survival over sacrifice.
And so, I would remain here, circling endlessly, another ghost on the barge of the damned.